From the pandemic to politics, as a turbulent year finally comes to a close, how do we move forward? We speak to local religious leaders to hear how faith can help unite and heal. That and more. Stay with us as we dive into your South Florida. Hi, I'm Pam Giganti. Welcome to your South Florida. From the COVID-19 pandemic to unemployment, the fight for racial justice, and the presidential election, 2020 has been a historic year no one will soon forget, full of uncertainty, fear, and loss. As part of our most recent virtual town hall, I spoke with Father Richard Vigoa of St. Augustine Catholic Church, the Children's Bereavement Center Chira, Cassel, Rabbi Cheryl Jacobs, and the First Presbyterian Church of Hollywood's pastor Kennedy McGowan, to talk about the ways faith can help heal and bring communities back together.
Let us pray to the Lord. Lord, hear our prayers. For all those who are suffering from the coronavirus or other illnesses, may Christ, the divine physician, bring them healing. Let us pray.
Father Richard Vigoa is the pastor of St. Augustine Church and Catholic Student Center at the University of Miami in Coral Gables. After contracting COVID-19 himself early on in the pandemic, Father Vigoa is using his shared experience with the virus to better connect with his congregation. Did you feel somewhat of a solidarity maybe with some of the parishioners who got it? Because we can talk about it sort of in abstract terms, but then to actually go through it, it's very different, right?
That's one of the silver linings, I think, of this is that because I got COVID, there was this, at least as a priest, to be able to relate to people and be in solidarity with someone who's sick or a family member who's sick, or how scary it is that you have COVID. As I said, some of our parishioners that had died, and be able to talk and counsel with some of the parishioners was very powerful. Because until you get it, you really don't know the effects of it.
I'm sure it was really stressful too, because you kept thinking, when am I going to get better? Because I need to get back to work.
We were still shut down, but there was a lot to do. And while we were shut down, I was sick. My brain's going, okay, how do we make this happen? People are at home, but we still want to contact our parishioners and be in touch. So how do we do this? Before COVID, one of the things that I wanted to do, and I've been stressing it, my mission statement was the new evangelization. What does that mean? The new evangelization is preaching the same gospel with different mediums, with ardor, with excitement. And so before COVID, we had this whole plan of how we're going to do the new evangelization. I was reluctant to do the digital evangelization. I thought, we'll get there. We'll see if there's the need for that, to kind of tape the masses, a podcast. And then COVID hits and we went to masses online. And so that was a decision we made early on to live stream everything. Every function that we did, talks, forums, parish hall, we wanted to create an online community where we were really connecting parishioners, and people felt that although I can't be on campus, I still know what's going on. From that, we did service outreaches and we would go out to people's homes. So the digital evangelization has really helped us fortify what we already had going on. It was the spiritual component was already strong. It was something that people loved.
So give us a sense too of where these new cameras are located, because they're really out of the way. Before you said everything, there were so many cables on the floor.
Oh yeah.
It was really, in the way.
And it's incredible because they're in the back of the church. We have one here on the side of the church, and it has the capacity to move and shift and rotate, and so it can capture the procession coming in. So these are very high-tech cameras, and we're just blessed to have them.
St. Augustine Church streams its masses on their app, where you can also access classes, other ministries, town halls, and the show Bless This Kitchen, which gives Father Vigoa the chance to get to know his parishioners, like Bea and John Harriman.
We needed that daily reinforcement. It's just been such a comfort to be able to pray together with other people, even if we're just spiritually connected, and to feel that unity that we needed so much.
John and Beatriz, welcome to Bless This Kitchen.
Father has been great. Father Vigoa has been wonderful about keeping that torch of faith alive, and that evangelization objective, which is one of St. Augustine's strengths with the UM students and our parishioners.
Have you had other parish priests reach out to you and say, what are you doing? I want some of that. I want to do that here.
Yeah, actually I have. I've had some of my brother priests who have come and said, what's going on? I hear such great things. And it's not about me. It's if you put the work in, it's gonna happen. I've always said that the secret sauce of any priest or pastor or evangelizer is the ministry of presence.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Being available, celebrating all the masses, celebrating the liturgies, being accessible to people. And I think that that catches on, and people feel the sense of belonging because here's someone who cares and wants you to be part of this family.
As a pastor, I'm sure you've had a lot of people come to you they're depressed. They have a lot of anxiety. They're tired of dealing with this, or they're just sad. So how do you pastor them? What do you say to them?
That is a reality that we're dealing with right now that is very serious. We're dealing with a lot of people with depression, with anxiety, sense of loss. And also an older population where their adult children are saying to them, listen, I don't want you to go to Mass, I don't want you to go to the grocery store, I don't want you out and about. But it's creating where we have an older generation who are finding themselves very lonely and very depressed. So something like our online masses and the different things that we're doing on different platforms has helped. I would say to someone who is dealing with that is, you need to connect to your faith community. You need to have a prayer life. You need to have that relationship with the Lord that's gonna sustain you and feed you. We're not gonna be able to do it by ourselves. There is a truth that lies outside of ourselves, and when we come to understand that, we can draw from that strength, and that helps us on our daily journey.
What about somebody who's watching this right now and they're not Catholic, maybe they don't even go to a church or have a religious life, but they're hurting and they want to do something? I mean, what would you say to someone like that?
I would say reach out to someone, even if you don't feel like it or if you don't want to. Someone that is a family member, a friend, maybe someone that you know that has a faith component in their life. If you're alone and you're stuck, you need to reach out.
This has been a crazy year, not only with COVID, but also with the social justice movement, the election, and now we're getting towards the end of the year. How can we handle that? And as we're hopeful for a 2021, but what should we be thinking about right now?
My suggestion would be is a position of thanksgiving, of blessings. We have our health, we have our family. We need to heal some divisions. We need to heal some brokenness that perhaps is in my own life or in my family's life. But I think it has to be from a point of departure of just thanksgiving, of feeling blessed and fortunate. And when you approach the world in that way, I think it just kind of comes together and you see it differently, because your response to the other is going to be different. The way that you look at the world is going to be a little bit different. And 2020 can teach us a lot if we're able to just to sit back and say, we need to grow from this and we need to love each other.
And we thank Father Vigoa for the opportunity to go down there and to speak with him and to go to the church and see what he's doing. Pastor, I want to start with you. Let's talk about some of the things that Father Vigoa touched on. One of them is this digital evangelization. We've all had to pivot when everything when COVID shut everything down. So talk about what you have been doing with your church and your congregation to keep that connection going. Are you digitally evangelizing as well?
Something that I began fairly early on in the pandemic as kind of an impromptu thing is we have a beautiful labyrinth on our campus. And I wanted to connect with people on like a regular basis. So I began walking the labyrinth using my phone on Facebook Live. And it's become our most popular offering. People will tune in during the day, they get some perspective. They don't even see my face, they just simply see the path and they hear my voice. So we've been able to find a variety of ways for people to connect to us, both digitally and also in some limited in person ways.
Yeah, and he talked about that ministry of presence, just being there.
Yeah.
Rabbi Jacobs, talk a little bit about that, about your accessibility to your congregation and to those whom you pastor, whom you talk to and counsel.
Look, the hardest part, obviously, about this whole thing has been the isolation and the disconnect.
Mm.
You know, we love to be together. We love to see each other. We love to be part of each other's lives. And very often, when you do that, you try and connect virtually, it can be difficult. So
Mm.
we try and make sure that everything that we do virtually reflects us. We want it to feel warm. We want it to feel intimate. And the truth is that many of the services we stream from our living room. And so we hope that whoever tunes in will almost feel like they're in our living room with us, cozying up on the couch. That's the
Mm.
goal, that we want whoever tunes in with us to know they are not
Mhm.
alone. They're sitting right
Mm.
next to us, regardless of where they are.
And that's so important. Chira, I want to bring you in. And we've talked in the past about positive psychology. And one of the things that I talked about with Father Vigoa was the sense of sadness, and that there are people who are struggling, they're depressed, they've lost a loved one during COVID, many of them. And they've perhaps also just lost their normal way of life, and they're really suffering in trying to just deal with all of this. So, talk about that sense of positive psychology and coping, and maybe some strategies people can use during all of this.
In positive psychology, people hear that term and they think, oh, this just must be about washing everything out with happiness. And that's a huge misconception. We need to also acknowledge the grief that's there, acknowledge the sadness, spend time with that, of course, and also acknowledge that there's a change that's occurring, right? And call that out. Because then when we acknowledge the grief and the sadness, we can also open ourselves up to joy. You can't numb yourself to one emotion and not the others. You don't get to sort of choose like that. And so in positive psychology, what we try to do is, we try to not just think about alleviating or mitigating symptoms of disorder or disease, or in this case, just to take away the sadness. We don't want to just be at a baseline of zero. We also want to focus on the positive end of the spectrum, right? So what are the components of psychological well-being and optimal human functioning, right? What are the things that bring us into the positive spectrum? So it could be things like social support, or getting in touch with meaning, or finding ways to become really engaged. Because also doing the positive work, right, could also help lift us out of the negative end of the spectrum. And it becomes more sustainable over time. So, I don't want to burden people with a lot, but of course, social support. That is the number one factor in one's adjustment after a loss. How much social support do you have? And also, again, hope. Can you be a hope hunter? Can you go after and find the ways to pick up hope? And they can be small. It can be a book. It can be someone who you look after. And social support, if it can be online. It could also be, you can hug your dog. What are the small steps you can take?
Rabbi, you are the pastor for both the Davie and the Fort Lauderdale police departments. We have gone through a very difficult season here, in 2020 after the death of George Floyd. We saw all of the protests, the calls for defunding the police. Talk to us about how you counseled those officers. And I'm sure
there were some difficult conversations there. I'm sure it was tough for some of them, just sort of trying to figure all of this out, right?
The fact is that our police officers are working tirelessly in our communities. Um, and so when I have spoken to them, I have told them to continue to serve with honor, continue to serve with integrity, that they went into this profession because they felt called to help, and to never forget that, even on the darkest days. And on those darkest days, to never doubt how much they are truly needed and appreciated in our communities.
And has that been helpful, or are they struggling? Some of them are struggling.
They're struggling. Every day there are incidents that we just don't hear about. And
Hmm.
um, you know, it's dangerous to be in law enforcement today. Um, it is unfortunate, of course, like in anything else, that there are bad people in every segment of society, but not to lump everybody in with those people who find themselves to be above the law. And
Hmm.
so all I can do is listen, give a
Hmm.
virtual hug, a shoulder to lean on, and
Yeah.
reassure them that we are so appreciative of the work that they do in our communities.
Yeah. And then one of the other things that's been very divisive this year, as you all know, is the election. We know that people are very divided, and it's divided families, it's divided friends. It's been very difficult. Just family chat sometimes can get very heated, and somebody has to say, hey, this isn't a conversation we should be having over our family chat where we used to share pictures of the kids. So, Pastor, have you encountered any of that within your congregation, and people saying, how do I ameliorate the situation in my family? How do we get past this and have a great holiday season together, because we're not getting along right now?
It's challenging. In fact, I actually spoke a little bit about it this past Sunday. And just, I think today, people almost are looking to politics as if it can provide some sort of salvation for them. That if this person gets elected or this person doesn't get elected, it's the end of everything or the beginning of everything. And beyond putting too great a rate on that, uh, beyond that, it kind of distracts people from finding meaning in their life in other places. And so I've tried to focus people in that direction. And we fortunately have a community where people are comfortable disagreeing in respectful ways, and that we can really strive to listen to each other and understand where each of us are coming from and why we're making certain decisions about things. But I think this is an opportunity for faith communities to realize, okay, there's a much larger picture here, and don't let your relationships in your family and among your friends get shattered because of something in the news that 10 years from now you may have quite a different perspective on than you have right now.
Pastor, your organization is the pastor of Ish, ISH. Explain to us what Ish is, and it's really for people who maybe don't necessarily have a worship home or a synagogue, correct?
Right. When I founded the organization Ish 5 or 6 years ago now, my husband and I spoke a lot about this and decided that we wanted to create an organization where you can be wherever you are. We will meet you wherever you are, which means that you do not have to use synagogue membership as an impediment to services. That if you need to a visit to the hospital, if you need somebody to come and sit by your bedside, if
Mhm.
you have a joyous occasion to share, there is somebody in the Jewish faith who will be there for you and who will always welcome you with open arms. And that's what it is. It's really a spiritual service with no bounds of membership. And synagogues are incredible, wonderful places. But some people don't feel a connection. And if they don't, then that's what we're here for, to give them that connection.
And that's kind of like one of those things, Pastor, that you touched on, that maybe people have been hurt by a church or they had a bad experience and that forced them to turn away from religion. But this digital evangelization, being able to reach you online, maybe kind of cracks the door open a little bit, right? People can kind of dip their toe back into the water without this huge commitment, or right? And it gives them a chance to kind of
No,
experience their faith life again.
I think it's helpful. I think it's why these Facebook Live labyrinth walks have become so popular, because it's about a 7-minute walk. You don't even see a face. Often I talk about things that are not so religious, so to speak. I will talk about a musical artist and share about the twists and turns of their life and how God was working in the midst of that. And so it's an opportunity for someone to kind of come and get a spiritual connection, and it, so to speak, dip their toe into the water. And of course, now the barrier of entry is very low, that you can check out a variety of different worship experiences at a variety of different religious communities by just pointing and clicking. And so it gives an opportunity for people to experience and explore their faith and their relationship with God in a very kind of safe environment. And maybe from that point, enter slowly, but hopefully surely, into deeper connections to that community.
Chira, as people deal with just these difficulties, maybe they're dealing with grief, there's something that you've talked about before that's called strength spotting. Can you kind of tell us what strength spotting is and how maybe we can help each other with that?
Yeah, so everybody has strengths that no one can take from them. You have them. You might, maybe it's something like your social intelligence, or maybe you're a very brave person, or maybe you have a lot of self control, or maybe you have a lot of compassion, or you appreciate beauty. So these are things that inherently, they're traits that inherently feel like you. And perhaps in different settings, different people or situations bring those strengths out of you. And sometimes in our hardest moments, during grief or other kinds of loss or challenges, sometimes we lose sight of our strengths. And so it helps to have another person with some perspective who can do the strength spotting for you, who can say to you, wow, that was incredible how you have stepped up, and now maybe you've lost your spouse, but you have stepped up and are taking care of your kids and you're entering the workforce again. Or maybe it's little things, maybe it's, to say to someone, to a child who's just had a loss, today you were able to focus for that half-hour class. And that was really wonderful, to just talk about, to sort of sit, to call them out for someone else, because the truth is, we can use our strengths to move us forward. And it feels easier. It feels nicer. It feels more compassionate to ourselves. And we can still go a long distance that way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, we are in the holiday season. We're approaching our holidays. Rabbi, talk a little bit about that. You've mentioned before that this is a time where there were miracles and light during very dark times. Talk about how we can approach the holidays.
It may not feel like there's a lot out there, a lot of miracles happening these days, but the fact is that every day that we go outside and we breathe fresh air and we get to spend time in quarantine with our loved ones, or speak to people we love on the phone, that's a miracle. That every day that we're here on the earth is a miracle. And that what the lights of Hanukkah teach us is that even in the darkest of days, there is light. And we just need to hang on, because that light is coming. And as we look at that menorah, those candles burning brightly this year, we just need to hold on. And in those flickering lights, see that promise of what's to come.
Pastor, talk about what we can look forward to as Christmas approaches.
Well, it's striking that Christianity has a very similar tradition approaching Christmas called Advent. And part of that tradition is actually lighting candles. Um, and it began because early Christian missionaries in Europe discovered that there was already a holiday called the winter solstice, which we still celebrate, called Yule. And it was a celebration on the longest night of the year. Um, and to note that darkness was leaving, this was the longest night, and the light would come, and with it eventually spring. And so Christians set Christmas and the birth of Jesus at that time to remind people that the light shines in the darkness. And so the tradition developed, rooted in these Yule traditions of having this wreath and lighting a candle, each of what are called the 4 weeks of Advent, and then lighting a central candle called the Christ candle on Christmas as reminder of God's light of love coming into the world in Jesus. And so actually the Christmas season can be an opportunity to remember that in the midst of dark times, that light shines, and that often it's in the darkness that you can even see the light more clearly. And so these rituals of lighting the candles, the Hanukkah candles in Judaism, the Advent candles in Christianity, provide real avenues and rituals for people to look for the light in the midst of the darkness.
Well, as we approach the end of our conversation, I'm going to go around and ask each of you what your hope is for next year. Chira, I'm going to start with you.
So I think my hope is that, this has been a tough year for a lot of people. And we have acknowledged that people are struggling with mental health and with grief. And so my hope is that because we're having so much conversation, that some of the stigma moves away and that people feel comfortable reaching out for support, or if they think that someone else might not, they feel comfortable suggesting it, so that people really can get the support that they need, and that we acknowledge that grief and sadness and hurt and disappointment are healthy and normal feelings. And I also hope, we see in our grief support groups that it's really through grief and through our toughest times that we find our commonalities, that we find our common humanity. And so I hope that through these struggles, that we don't lose sight of that, so that as we create a new normal, that we can move forward with compassion and just really remember what we have that's shared, because we are more alike than we are different.
Rabbi Jacobs, what's your hope for next year?
My hope is really very simple, for love and understanding, that we truly find a way to embrace one another, both literally and metaphorically.
And Pastor, your hope for 2021?
I hope that this time of social distancing will hopefully help people value community a bit more deeply and understand that sometimes we can take for granted the value of that. And that in the context of these conversations and these challenges of social distancing, people might, open their hearts a little bit more, might even become more vulnerable in places, and might value one another more deeply, having these experiences of being socially distanced in these days.
You can watch the full town hall plus my extended interview with Father Vigoa on our Facebook page at Your South FL. Until then, stay well, thanks for watching, and happy holidays.